A plumber refused payment from a sick veteran. Hours later, his phone rang with shocking news. Marcus Jameson wiped the sweat from his brow as he stepped into the cramped apartment of Mr. Thompson. The flickering fluorescent light overhead cast a harsh glow on the peeling wallpaper, revealing the years of neglect that had taken root in this old building. The faint sound of water dripping echoed in the small space, each drop a reminder of the plumbing emergency that had brought him here. "Can you fix it?" Mr. Thompson asked, his voice raspy and weak as he leaned against the doorframe. "Let's take a look," Marcus replied, pulling on his work gloves. He had heard stories about the old veteran from the community, tales of his service in the war and the struggles he faced since returning. Marcus felt a rush of sympathy, knowing how hard it was for veterans like Mr. Thompson to get the help they needed. As he knelt down to inspect the source of the leak beneath the sink, he caught a glimpse of Mr. Thompson's frail frame. The man's skin was pale, his eyes sunken, and his breathing labored. Marcus felt a pang of guilt wash over him. Here was a man who had sacrificed so much for his country, now living in a rundown apartment, struggling to make ends meet. The plumbing was a disaster. Water pooled around Marcus's feet as he fished out a tangle of corroded pipes. "This is bad, Mr. Thompson. You've got some major issues here," he said, trying to keep his tone light. "I can fix it, but it's going to take some time and it won't be cheap." Mr. Thompson's face fell. I don't have much money, son. I just paid for my medication last week." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He had bills to pay too. Rent was due in a few days, and business had been slow lately. But the thought of charging Mr. Thompson felt wrong. "Listen," Marcus said, straightening up and meeting the veteran's weary gaze. "I can't take your money for this. You need it more than I do." No, Mr. Thompson protested, shaking his head weakly. "I can't let you do that. I have my pride." Marcus took a deep breath. "Your pride doesn't matter right now. You're not well, and this place needs fixing. I'll help you out this time." He could see the gratitude mixed with shame in Mr. Thompson's eyes, and it made Marcus's heart ache. With a heavy sigh, Mr. Thompson relented, though the tension in his shoulders remained. "If you insist, Marcus, thank you. I just don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," Marcus replied firmly, pulling out his tools. "You're a veteran who deserves help." As he worked, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling of unease settling in his stomach. He was doing the right thing. He knew that. But what about his own bills? He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task at hand, twisting wrenches and replacing pipes, his hands moving mechanically as he tried to forget the financial strain that loomed over him. The minutes turned into hours as he carefully repaired the plumbing, the clanking of tools, and the rush of water filling the silence between them. Marcus found himself chatting with Mr. Thompson, learning about his life and struggles. The stories flowed easily, and Marcus felt a warmth in his chest, a connection that transcended the barriers of age and circumstance. "You know, I used to fix things like this when I was in the service," Mr. Thompson reminisced, his voice gaining strength as he spoke about his past. "Sometimes I miss the camaraderie, the purpose." Marcus nodded, listening intently. "I can imagine. It must be tough to come back and feel lost." Mr. Thompson's gaze turned distant, and for a moment, Marcus could see the weight of memories etched on his face. "It is. I fought for something that felt bigger than me, and now it's just me." The weight of those words hung in the air, and Marcus felt a deep sense of empathy for the man before him. "You're not alone, Mr. Thompson. You've got people who care about you." "Like you?" Mr. Thompson asked, a hint of a smile breaking through his somber demeanor. "Yeah, like me. And the community. We look out for each other." Marcus tightened the last bolt and stood back, surveying his work. The leak was fixed, the water now flowing freely and without obstruction. "Looks good, Marcus," Mr. Thompson said, his voice filled with a mix of relief and gratitude. "I wish I could pay you something." Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "Just take care of yourself, okay? That's payment enough." As he packed up his tools, a sense of pride washed over him. He had made a difference, however small, in Mr. Thompson's life. But as he stepped outside, the reality of his own situation came crashing back. Rent was due, and he still had bills to pay. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the street as he walked to his truck. Marcus pulled out his phone, glancing at the screen. No new calls, no new jobs lined up. He sighed, sliding into the driver's seat and resting his head against the steering wheel. "Get it together, Marcus," he muttered to himself. "It's just one job." But as he turned the key in the ignition, a sense of foreboding settled in the pit of his stomach. What if he couldn't pay rent this month? What if his decision to help Mr. Thompson came back to haunt him? He shook his head, trying to dispel the dark thoughts. He had done a good thing. That had to count for something. Just as he was about to pull away, his phone buzzed again, vibrating against the dashboard. He glanced at the screen, frowning when he saw an unknown number. Hesitant, he answered. "Hello? Is this Marcus Jameson?" a voice on the other end asked, sharp and urgent. "It is. Who's this?" "This is the emergency room at St. Joseph's Hospital. I'm afraid I have some concerning news about Mr. Thompson." Marcus's heart raced as the implications of the call sunk in. "What happened? Is he all right?" "Mr. Thompson has been admitted. He's in critical condition due to complications from his illness." Marcus's breath hitched. "What do you mean, critical condition?" "The doctors are doing everything they can, but we need someone to cover his medical expenses. It's urgent, Mr. Jameson. Can we count on you?" The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He had just walked away from Mr. Thompson's apartment, convinced he had done the right thing by helping him, yet now he felt the weight of his decision coming back to haunt him. I don't know," Marcus stammered, disbelief coursing through him. "I didn't take any payment for the repairs." "Yes, we're aware, but we need someone to step in. Mr. Thompson mentioned you as a key contact. Can you come to the hospital?" "Of course," Marcus said, his voice trembling slightly. He hung up the phone, feeling the gravity of the situation settle around him. He turned the ignition and drove towards the hospital, his thoughts racing. How had things escalated so quickly? He had wanted to help, but now he was faced with the reality of Mr. Thompson's health crisis and the financial ramifications that came with it. As he navigated the streets, the sun dipped below the horizon, and darkness enveloped the city. The fluorescent lights of the hospital loomed ahead, a stark contrast to the dimming sky. Marcus parked and rushed inside, his heart pounding in his chest as he approached the reception desk. "I'm here for Mr. Thompson," he said, urgency lacing his voice. "Please fill out this form," the receptionist replied, handing him a clipboard. Marcus glanced at the form, but his mind was elsewhere, racing with thoughts of Mr. Thompson's condition and the implications of his refusal to accept payment. The truth was starting to dawn on him. His good deed had tied him to this situation in ways he hadn't anticipated. As he scribbled his information, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was now part of something much larger than himself, a fight against neglect and indifference, and he was determined to see it through. Marcus stood at the reception desk, the clipboard trembling in his grip as he filled out the necessary information. Each stroke of the pen felt heavy, laden with the uncertainty of what he might find behind the hospital doors. He turned to the receptionist, a young woman with tired eyes and a sympathetic smile. "Can you tell me which room Mr. Thompson is in?" he asked, his voice a mix of urgency and anxiety. "Room 204 down the hall to your left," she replied, pointing with a weary hand. "But I should warn you, he's in critical condition. The doctors are doing everything they can." "Thank you," Marcus murmured, his heart sinking further. He made his way down the sterile hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, amplifying the sense of dread that clung to him. As he approached room 204, Marcus took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He pushed the door open slowly, the hinges creaking, and stepped inside. The sight that greeted him was a stark contrast to the man he had just met hours earlier. Mr. Thompson lay in the hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines and IV drips. His once vibrant spirit seemed dimmed, the color drained from his cheeks. A nurse was adjusting the IV, and she glanced up at Marcus with a knowing look. "Are you family?" she asked gently. "No, but I'm a friend. I helped him with some plumbing issues today," Marcus replied, his voice barely above a whisper. The nurse nodded, her expression softening. "He's fighting hard. We're doing our best to stabilize him. The doctors will be in shortly to discuss his condition." Marcus moved closer, his heart aching at the sight of Mr. Thompson's frail figure. He pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed, taking in the beeping machines and the sterile smell of antiseptic. "Hey, Mr. Thompson," he said softly, hoping to coax some awareness from the veteran. "It's Marcus. I'm here, Mr. D." Thompson's eyelids fluttered, but he didn't respond. Marcus took the old man's hand in his own, feeling the coolness of his skin. "You've got to hang in there. You're tougher than this." Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as Marcus waited, his mind racing with worry. This was a man who had served his country, who had faced battles far greater than a plumbing issue, and yet here he was, fighting for his life in a hospital bed. The weight of his earlier decision pressed heavier on Marcus's chest. Had he done enough? Just then, the door swung open, and a doctor in a white coat stepped in, flanked by 2 nurses. "Mr. Jameson?" the doctor asked, looking directly at Marcus. "Yes, that's me," Marcus replied, standing up, his heart pounding. "I'm Dr. Patel. We're doing everything we can for Mr. Thompson. He's experiencing complications related to his health condition, and we need to discuss his options moving forward." Marcus nodded, his throat tight. "What are his chances?" Dr. Patel exchanged a glance with the nurse before turning back to Marcus. "It's serious. We need to stabilize him, but he's also facing significant medical bills. Given his current state, we're looking at a long-term care situation, and that's where we need your help." "Help?" Marcus echoed, confusion swirling in his mind. I can't cover his medical expenses." The doctor's expression softened. "I understand. But we need someone who can take responsibility for his care, someone who can help navigate his options. He mentioned you as a key contact, and we want to make sure he has the support he needs." A wave of panic gripped Marcus. "But I didn't take payment for fixing his plumbing. I can't afford this." "Mr. Thompson has a life insurance policy that could cover his expenses, but we need to contact the beneficiaries to access those funds. Unfortunately, it's complicated," Dr. Patel explained. "We're in a tough spot, and we need someone to help push this forward." Marcus felt the room spinning. He had gone from simply fixing a leaky sink to being thrust into a life-or-death situation. "What do you need me to do?" "We need you to be involved in the discussions with the insurance company and help us ensure Mr. Thompson receives the care he deserves," Dr. Patel said, his tone earnest. "We can't do this without someone who knows him and can advocate on his behalf." Marcus's mind raced. He had just come from a tough job, and now he was being asked to step into a role he had never anticipated. But looking at Mr. Thompson lying helplessly in the bed, Marcus felt an undeniable urge to fight for him. "All right, I'll help however I can," he said, determination creeping into his voice. "Thank you," Dr. Patel replied, relief evident in his eyes. "We'll need to start by contacting the insurance company. I'll give you the paperwork to fill out. It's crucial we act quickly." As the doctor outlined the steps, Marcus felt a flicker of hope igniting within him. He had always believed in the importance of community, of standing up for one another, and now he had a chance to put that belief into action. After the doctor left, Marcus sat back down beside Mr. Thompson's bed, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. The weight of what lay ahead settled on his shoulders, but he was determined to see it through. He couldn't let Mr. Thompson down, not after everything he had endured. Time passed slowly as he filled out the paperwork provided by the doctor, his hands shaking slightly as he signed his name in places where it was required. Each signature felt like a promise, a commitment to stand by Mr. Thompson and advocate for him in this time of crisis. Suddenly, the door opened again, and a familiar figure stepped inside. It was Victor Hayes, the landlord. The sight of him sent a jolt of anger through Marcus. What was he doing here? Victor's presence was imposing. He wore a tailored suit, the kind that suggested wealth and power. "Marcus," he said, his tone feigning concern, "I heard about Mr. Thompson's situation. I came to see how he was doing." "Why do you care?" Marcus shot back, rising to his feet. "You've done nothing but neglect this place." Victor raised an eyebrow, his demeanor cool and collected. "I have business to run, but I assure you, I don't want anything to happen to my tenants. They're my responsibility." "Responsibility?" Marcus scoffed. "You call this neglect responsibility? You've let this building fall apart. You're the reason he's here in the first place." Victor's expression hardened. "Watch your tone, Marcus. You're in over your head. You think you can just waltz in here and play hero? You're risking your own livelihood." "I'm doing what's right," Marcus retorted, fists clenching at his sides. "You wouldn't understand that, would you?" The tension hung thick in the air, a standoff between two men with opposing values. Victor's eyes narrowed, and Marcus could see the disdain seeping through his polished exterior. You think helping one old man will save you from the mess you're in? You don't know what you're getting into. I know enough, Marcus shot back, his voice steady. I know that you're the reason this place is falling apart, and I'm going to make sure the truth comes out. Victor's lips curled into a smirk. Good luck with that, Marcus. You'll need it. With that, he turned on his heel and strode out of the room, leaving Marcus seething with frustration. As the door clicked shut, Marcus returned to Mr. Thompson's side, feeling a surge of determination. He wasn't just fighting for one man. He was standing against the system that allowed people like Victor to thrive while ignoring the suffering of others. Hang in there, Mr. Thompson, he whispered, gripping the old man's hand. I'm going to do everything I can to help you. We're going to get through this together. The battle had just begun, and Marcus was ready to face whatever came next. Marcus leaned against the cool wall of the hospital corridor, the fluorescent lights flickering above him as he stared at the paperwork scattered across the small, sterile table. The forms were a jumble of medical jargon and insurance lingo, each line a reminder of the complexity of Mr. Thompson's situation. He had just taken on a new role, advocate, fighter, ally, and the weight of that responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. After Victor Hayes's visit, Marcus felt a surge of urgency. He needed to act. He couldn't let the landlord's indifference stand in the way of Mr. Thompson's care. As he scanned the forms, a nurse approached him, her expression kind but serious. Mr. Jameson, how's it going? She asked, glancing at the pile of paperwork. It's a lot to take in, Marcus admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. I want to make sure I'm doing everything right for Mr. Thompson. I understand. Just remember you're not alone in this. We're here to help. The nurse paused, then added, Dr. Patel is in a meeting with the insurance company right now. He'll update you as soon as he can. Thanks, Marcus replied, feeling a mix of gratitude and anxiety. I just feel like time is of the essence. The nurse nodded empathetically. It is, but you're doing the right thing by being here for him. It means a lot. As she walked away, Marcus took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had to keep his focus sharp. He thought back to the conversation he'd had with Mr. Thompson earlier, the stories woven into the fabric of the old man's life. He couldn't let those stories end here, not on the cold, sterile floor of a hospital. Suddenly, his phone buzzed in his pocket, startling him from his thoughts. He pulled it out to see a text from an unknown number. Unknown. We need to talk. It's urgent. Meet me at the diner on 5th in 30 minutes. Curiosity mixed with unease, but he decided he couldn't ignore the message. He grabbed his bag and made his way out of the hospital, determined to get to the bottom of this mystery. The diner on 5th was a familiar spot, a retro haven where the scent of bacon and coffee drifted through the air. As Marcus pushed through the door, the bell jingled cheerfully, but the atmosphere felt heavy. He scanned the crowded room until his eyes landed on a figure sitting at a booth in the back. It was Tanya, a local activist and a friend of Mr. Thompson's. They had crossed paths during community meetings, where Tanya tirelessly advocated for tenant rights and social justice. Her presence here came as a welcome surprise. Marcus, she called, waving him over. I'm glad you came. What's going on? He asked, sliding into the booth across from her. I got your text. Is it about Mr. Thompson? Tanya nodded, her expression serious. Yes, I've been following the situation, and I'm worried about him. I heard about Victor's negligence and how it's affecting the tenants. Negligence is putting it lightly, Marcus replied, frustration bubbling to the surface. He's been avoiding repairs and putting people's lives at risk. I just left the hospital. Mr. Thompson is in critical condition, and I'm trying to figure out how to help him. Tanya leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. I have some contacts who might be able to help. We need to gather evidence against Victor. What he's doing is illegal, and it's time someone held him accountable. Marcus felt a spark of hope ignite within him. What do you have in mind? There's a tenants' rights group meeting tonight at the community center. I think it's important for you to be there. We can rally support, talk to others who've experienced Victor's neglect, and figure out our next steps. I want to, but I also need to focus on Mr. Thompson. He's counting on me, Marcus said, torn between two pressing responsibilities. I understand, but you can't do this alone. If we want to help Mr. Thompson, we need to confront Victor together. You're in a pivotal position since you're directly involved with the case, Tanya urged. Marcus sighed, realizing she was right. They needed a collective effort to tackle Victor's indifference. All right, I'll come to the meeting, but I need to make sure Mr. Thompson is stable first. Of course, let's work together to get him the care he deserves, Tanya said, her eyes shining with determination. The two of them spent the next few minutes discussing the tenants who had been affected by Victor's actions. As they talked, Marcus felt the weight of the community's struggles mirrored in his own. They shared stories of neglect, missed repairs, and the frustration of being at the mercy of a landlord who cared more about profit than people. Did you know that Victor has been fined multiple times for violations? Tanya asked, her voice low. But he always manages to wiggle out of the consequences. It's infuriating. Yeah, I believe it. He thinks he's untouchable, Marcus replied, clenching his fists. But we can't let him get away with this anymore. After finishing their conversation, Marcus glanced at his watch. I need to get back to the hospital. I'll see you at the meeting tonight. See you there, Tanya said, determination etched on her face. As Marcus made his way back to the hospital, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just fighting for Mr. Thompson. He was fighting for the entire community that had been silenced for too long. When he arrived at the hospital, the atmosphere felt different. The usually bustling halls were quieter, the beeping of machines more pronounced. He rushed to Mr. Thompson's room, his heart racing. As he opened the door, he was met with a sight that made his stomach drop. Dr. Patel stood by the bed, his expression grave. The nurse was adjusting the IV, and Mr. Thompson looked more fragile than before. Mr. Jameson, Dr. Patel said, acknowledging his presence with a nod. We need to talk. What's happening? Marcus asked, dread pooling in his stomach. Mr. Thompson's condition has deteriorated. We're doing everything we can, but we need to make a decision about his care options, the doctor explained. Marcus felt the walls closing in around him. What do you mean? Is there something more we can do? We're facing some challenges with the insurance company, and we need to act quickly. If the policy doesn't cover his long-term care, we might have to consider other options, Dr. Patel said, his voice steady but urgent. Other options, Marcus echoed, his heart racing. What are you saying? Dr. Patel hesitated, clearly weighing his words. I'm saying we need to prepare for the possibility of palliative care if we can't stabilize him. It's crucial that we have someone who can make decisions. No, we can't give up on him, Marcus said, desperation creeping into his voice. He's fought through so much. I won't let him down. Marcus, I'm not saying we give up, Dr. Patel replied, his tone firm yet compassionate. But we have to be realistic. Let's discuss our options, and we can work together to ensure he receives the best care. Marcus took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He couldn't let fear dictate his actions. All right, let's do whatever it takes, he said, determination seeping into his voice. I'm not going to let him go without a fight. The doctor nodded, appreciation evident in his eyes. That's the spirit. We'll do everything we can to advocate for Mr. Thompson. It's critical that we keep him stable while we navigate the insurance issues. As they began discussing the next steps, Marcus felt a surge of resolve wash over him. He was not just a plumber anymore. He was a champion for Mr. Thompson, for the community, and for all those who had been overlooked and underestimated. But the reality of the situation loomed large. The battle against Victor and the implications of Mr. Thompson's health would test Marcus in ways he had never imagined. He was ready to embrace the challenge, to rally the community, and to fight for justice. After the meeting with Dr. Patel, Marcus stepped out into the hallway, his mind racing with thoughts of the upcoming tenants' rights meeting. He couldn't shake the feeling that the fight to help Mr. Thompson was just the beginning. The clock was ticking, and he needed to harness the community's strength to confront Victor once and for all. Marcus paced the hospital corridor, his mind racing with the weight of the night ahead. He had just learned that Mr. Thompson's condition was deteriorating, and the looming threat of palliative care hung over him like a dark cloud. Each tick of the clock seemed to echo with urgency, reminding him that time was not on their side. He glanced at his watch. It was almost time for the tenants' rights meeting. The thought of joining forces with others who understood the struggles of living under Victor Hayes's thumb filled him with a sense of purpose. But the fear of losing Mr. Thompson gnawed at him. I'll be back soon, he whispered to the old man, who lay still and fragile in the hospital bed, unaware of the storm brewing outside. Stepping into the cool evening air, Marcus took a deep breath, trying to clear his mind. The streets were bustling with life, a stark contrast to the sterile environment of the hospital. He made his way toward the community center, the familiar path offering little comfort. In the past few months, he had come to appreciate the solidarity of the community more than ever. Now, he needed it more than ever. As he entered the community center, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. A group of tenants had gathered, their faces a mix of determination and frustration. Tanya was already there, her presence a comforting sight in the midst of chaos. "Marcus, you made it," she called out, her voice cutting through the chatter. She waved him over, and he joined her at a table where several other tenants were seated. "Thanks for waiting for me," Marcus said, trying to catch his breath. "I just came from the hospital. Mr. Thompson is in critical condition." The room fell silent as the gravity of his words sank in. Tanya's expression shifted to one of concern. "What can we do to help?" "I think we need to gather as much information as we can about Victor's negligence. If we're going to help Mr. Thompson, we need to expose what he's been doing," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "Agreed," Tanya said, her eyes gleaming with determination. "We can collect testimonies and document any violations. If we can build a case against him, we might be able to hold him accountable." One of the older tenants, Mrs. Johnson, spoke up. "I've had issues with my plumbing for months, and he's done nothing to fix it. It's not just Mr. Thompson, he's neglecting all of us." "Exactly," Marcus replied, feeling a surge of solidarity in the room. "We need to show everyone that we're not going to be silenced anymore." As the meeting progressed, they shared stories of neglect and exploitation at the hands of Victor. Each tale fueled the fire of their collective anger, and Marcus could feel the momentum building in the room. "We can't let him get away with this," Tanya declared, rallying the group. "If we come together, we're stronger. We can demand the repairs and care we deserve." "Let's create a petition," another tenant suggested. "If we get enough signatures, we can take it to the city council." Marcus nodded, feeling a sense of hope rising within him. "Yes, we need to show them how many people Victor is hurting. We have to make it clear that we're not just a group of tenants. We're a community that stands united." The group buzzed with energy, and as they organized their efforts, Marcus felt a sense of purpose envelop him. For the first time since he had stepped into the hospital, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself, a movement for justice, a fight for dignity. As the meeting drew to a close, Tanya turned to Marcus. "What do you think? Can we count on you to help us gather the evidence?" "Absolutely. I'll do whatever it takes," Marcus replied, a fierce determination igniting in his chest. "We need to plan our next steps carefully. If we're going to confront Victor, we have to be smart about it." The group agreed to meet again the following week to compile their findings and finalize the petition. With a sense of unity in the air, they left the community center feeling empowered. As Marcus walked back to the hospital, the cool night air felt refreshing against his skin. He was invigorated by the energy of the meeting, yet the weight of Mr. Thompson's condition still hung heavy in his heart. He needed to balance the urgency of the fight ahead with the immediate need to support the veteran. When he arrived at the hospital, he found Mr. Thompson's room dimly lit, the machines beeping rhythmically. The nurse was adjusting the IV drip, and she looked up as Marcus entered. "Hey, how's he doing?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Still critical, but we're monitoring his vitals closely. The doctors are doing everything they can," she replied, her tone reassuring. "You're doing the right thing by being here." Marcus took a seat beside Mr. Thompson, feeling the warmth of the old man's hand in his own. "I'm here, Mr. Thompson. You're not alone in this fight." Minutes turned into hours as he sat vigil, lost in thoughts of the community meeting and the plans they had discussed. He couldn't shake the feeling that their fight against Victor had only just begun. Just then his phone buzzed again, breaking the silence. He glanced at the screen to see another unknown number. Hesitant, he answered. "Hello? Mr. Jameson?" A shaky voice came through the line. "This is Ms. Rivers from the insurance company. We need to discuss Mr. Thompson's policy." Marcus's heart raced as he sat up straighter. "Yes, of course. What's the status?" "Unfortunately, we're facing some complications with his policy. There are questions regarding the coverage for his current condition, and we need to clarify a few details before we can proceed," Ms. Rivers explained. What kind of complications? Marcus asked, anxiety creeping into his voice. There are stipulations regarding long-term care that we need to address. I can't go into specifics over the phone, but it's imperative that you come in to discuss this matter further, she said, her voice tense. I can be there tomorrow. Just tell me what I need to bring, Marcus replied, his mind racing with the implications. Please bring any documentation you have regarding his recent treatments and the policy details. We need to expedite this process, Ms. Rivers said before ending the call. Marcus felt a rush of determination. He had to gather everything he could to advocate for Mr. Thompson. He needed to ensure that the old man received the care he deserved, no matter the cost. As he hung up the phone, he glanced over at Mr. Thompson, who lay still in his bed, fighting his own battle. I'm going to make sure you get the help you need, Marcus promised, his voice steady. We're in this together. With renewed resolve, Marcus prepared himself for the fight ahead. The road to justice would not be easy, but he was ready to take on Victor Hayes in the system that allowed neglect to flourish. Mr. Thompson's life depended on it, and he wouldn't let the old man down. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the hospital with a sense of urgency coursing through him. He had spent the night gathering documents and preparing for his meeting with the insurance company. The stakes were high, and he felt the weight of Mr. Thompson's life resting on his shoulders. As he entered the hospital, the familiar antiseptic smell hit him, but today it felt different, charged with tension and anticipation. He made his way to Mr. Thompson's room, where the old man lay still, the rhythmic beeping of the machines, a constant reminder of his fragile state. Hey, Mr. Thompson, Marcus said softly, taking a seat beside the bed. I'm here to fight for you. I promise I won't let you down. The nurse entered, her expression professional yet warm. Good morning, Mr. Jameson. I hope you're ready for your meeting. Dr. Patel will be here shortly to discuss Mr. Thompson's care. I'm ready, Marcus replied, his heart racing. I've got everything we need to push for his treatment. As he waited, Marcus's mind raced with the thoughts of Victor Hayes. The landlord's indifference had put Mr. Thompson in this position, and Marcus was determined to hold him accountable. He couldn't shake the feeling that Victor was lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Dr. Patel entered the room, his demeanor serious. Good morning, Marcus. I appreciate your dedication to Mr. Thompson's care. I understand you have some concerns regarding the insurance policy. Yes, I do, Marcus replied, his voice steady. I spoke with Ms. Rivers from the insurance company, and she mentioned complications with Mr. Thompson's coverage. I want to ensure he gets the care he needs. Dr. Patel nodded, his expression grave. The insurance company is hesitant to approve long-term care without sufficient documentation. We need to present a strong case to them, and I believe your involvement will be crucial. I'm ready to do whatever it takes, Marcus said, determination flooding his voice. I've gathered all the necessary documents, and I'm prepared to advocate for Mr. Thompson. Good. Let's meet with Ms. Rivers and discuss our options, Dr. Patel said, leading Marcus out of the room. As they walked through the hospital corridors, Marcus felt a mix of anxiety and resolve. He was stepping into a battle, one that would require every ounce of strength he had. They arrived at the insurance office, where Ms. Rivers was waiting, her expression professional but slightly apprehensive. Thank you for coming, Mr. Jameson, she said, gesturing for them to sit. I understand you have some concerns about Mr. Thompson's policy. Yes, I do, Marcus replied, laying out the documents he had prepared. I want to ensure that he receives the necessary care without any delays. His health is deteriorating, and we need to act quickly. Ms. Rivers glanced at the papers, her brow furrowing. I appreciate your diligence, but I must inform you that there are stipulations in the policy regarding long-term care. We need to clarify Mr. Thompson's eligibility. Eligibility? Marcus echoed, frustration bubbling to the surface. He's a veteran who has served this country. He deserves the best care possible, and we shouldn't be held back by bureaucratic red tape. Dr. Patel interjected, his tone firm. Mr. Thompson's condition is critical. We need to expedite this process. If you can't approve the necessary treatments, we will have to explore other options. Ms. Rivers sighed, her expression softening slightly. I understand your concerns, but I need to follow protocol. If we can gather more documentation regarding his medical history and the urgency of his situation, we may be able to expedite the approval. Marcus felt a surge of determination. I can get that information. I'll reach out to his previous doctors and gather everything we need, but we need to act fast. Very well, Ms. Rivers replied, her tone more accommodating. If you can provide the necessary documentation, I will do my best to push this through. As they left the office, Marcus felt a mix of relief and frustration. They had made some progress, but the battle was far from over. He needed to gather the information quickly, and he knew he couldn't do it alone. Dr. Patel, can you help me reach out to Mr. Thompson's previous doctors? Marcus asked, his voice steady. I want to ensure we have everything we need to advocate for him. Of course, Dr. Patel replied, his expression resolute. I'll assist you in contacting them. We'll make sure we have a comprehensive medical history to present to the insurance company. With a plan in place, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was determined to fight for Mr. Thompson, to ensure that the old man received the care he deserved. As they made their way back to Mr. Thompson's room, Marcus's mind raced with thoughts of the upcoming community meeting. They needed to rally support, to show Victor that they were united in their fight. When they arrived at the room, Marcus took a deep breath before stepping inside. Hey, Mr. Thompson, he said softly, taking the old man's hand. We're working on getting you the care you need. I won't let you down. The nurse entered, checking the IV and monitoring the machines. He's stable for now, but we need to keep a close eye on him, she said, her tone professional yet caring. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He had to keep fighting, not just for Mr. Thompson, but for everyone who had been affected by Victor's negligence. After a few hours of gathering information and making calls, Marcus felt a sense of urgency building within him. He needed to get back to the community center for the meeting. As he prepared to leave, Dr. Patel approached him. Marcus, I admire your dedication, the doctor said, his tone sincere. You're doing a great job advocating for Mr. Thompson. Just remember to take care of yourself, too. Thank you, Dr. Patel. I appreciate your support, Marcus replied, feeling a sense of camaraderie with the doctor. I'll keep pushing for Mr. Thompson's care. As he left the hospital, Marcus felt a mix of determination and anxiety. The community meeting was crucial, and he needed to rally everyone together to confront Victor. He arrived at the community center, where the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Tanya was already there, her expression focused. Marcus, I'm glad you made it. We've gathered a lot of information from the tenants, and I think we're ready to take action. Good, Marcus replied, feeling a surge of hope. We need to present a united front against Victor. We can't let him continue to neglect our community. As the meeting began, Marcus shared the updates on Mr. Thompson's situation and the steps they were taking to advocate for his care. The room filled with murmurs of concern and determination, and Marcus could feel the energy building. We need to confront Victor directly, Tanya said, her voice steady. We can't let him think he can get away with this any longer. Agreed, Marcus replied, his heart racing. We need to gather evidence and present it to the city council. If we can show them how many lives he's affected, we can push for change. The group rallied around the idea, their voices rising in agreement. They began to strategize, discussing how to gather testimonies and document the neglect they had experienced. Marcus felt a sense of unity in the room, a shared determination to fight for their rights. As the meeting progressed, Marcus's thoughts drifted back to Mr. Thompson. He couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. They needed to act quickly, not just for the old man, but for everyone who had suffered under Victor's reign. After the meeting, Tanya approached Marcus. We're making progress, but we need to keep the momentum going. Are you ready to confront Victor? I am, Marcus replied, his voice steady. We need to show him that we're not afraid anymore. We're going to fight for our community. As they prepared for the confrontation, Marcus felt a mix of anxiety and determination. He knew that standing up to Victor would not be easy, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The next day, they gathered outside Victor's office, a group of tenants united in their cause. Marcus stood at the front, his heart pounding as he prepared to speak. We're here to demand accountability, he said, his voice strong. We won't be silenced any longer. As they confronted Victor, Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline. This was their moment, a chance to stand up for what was right. They presented their evidence, their testimonies, and their demands for change. Victor's expression shifted from indifference to anger as he realized the strength of the community standing before him. You think you can intimidate me? He sneered, but Marcus could see the cracks in his facade. "We're not afraid of you anymore," Marcus replied, his voice unwavering. "We're fighting for our rights, and we won't back down." As the confrontation escalated, Marcus felt a sense of empowerment wash over him. They were no longer victims. They were a united front, ready to take on the challenges ahead. In the days that followed, the community rallied together, gathering more evidence and support. They reached out to local media, sharing their stories, and shining a light on Victor's negligence. The momentum was building, and Marcus felt a sense of hope for the future. The day had arrived. The community gathered at the city council meeting, a mix of nervousness and determination filling the air. Marcus stood at the front of the room, flanked by fellow tenants who had come together in solidarity. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation, and he could feel the weight of their collective hope resting on his shoulders. As the council members took their seats, Marcus glanced around the room, taking in the faces of those who had come to support Mr. Thompson and demand accountability from Victor Hayes. Among them were Mrs. Johnson, Tanya, and others who had shared their stories of neglect and hardship. This was their moment to be heard. "Thank you all for coming today," the mayor began, her voice steady. "We're here to address the concerns raised by the tenants of the Maplewood Apartments regarding the management of the property and the urgent situation involving Mr. Thompson." Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline as the mayor acknowledged their fight. This was a step forward, a sign that they were being taken seriously. He took a deep breath, readying himself to speak. "Good afternoon," Marcus said, his voice rising to fill the room. "My name is Marcus Jameson, and I'm here to advocate for my neighbor, Mr. Thompson, and all the tenants who have suffered under Victor Hayes' neglect." He paused, looking around at the assembly of council members and the audience filling the seats. "Mr. Thompson is a veteran who has dedicated his life to serving this country. He deserves better than living in a dilapidated apartment, fighting for his life while the landlord turns a blind eye." As he spoke, the room fell silent, the gravity of his words resonating with everyone present. "We've gathered testimonies from tenants who have experienced neglect, inadequate repairs, and unsafe living conditions. Victor Hayes has exploited the residents of Maplewood Apartments for far too long." Victor, seated at the back of the room, shifted uncomfortably, his face flushing with anger. Marcus could see the cracks beginning to form in his facade. It was time to expose the truth. "Today we demand action," Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. "We want an investigation into the management of Maplewood Apartments and immediate changes to ensure safe living conditions for all tenants. We deserve to live without fear of neglect, and we will not back down until we see change." The audience erupted in applause, the sound reverberating off the walls. Marcus felt a swell of pride as he watched his neighbors rally behind him. They were no longer silent victims. They were a force to be reckoned with. Tanya stepped forward, ready to share her own testimony. "I've lived in Maplewood for over 5 years, and I've seen firsthand how Victor prioritizes profits over people. My plumbing issues went ignored for months, and I know I'm not alone. We need accountability." One by one, the tenants shared their experiences, painting a vivid picture of the neglect they had endured. Each story added weight to their cause, and Marcus could feel the momentum building. The council members exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from indifference to concern. As the testimonies concluded, the mayor turned to Victor, her tone firm. "Mr. Hayes, you've heard the testimonies presented today. How do you respond to these allegations?" Victor straightened in his chair, his bravado returning. "These are just baseless claims from disgruntled tenants. I've maintained the property to the best of my ability," he said, his voice laced with arrogance. "Baseless!" Mrs. Johnson interjected, her voice shaking with emotion. "We are not liars. We are your tenants, and we deserve to be treated with respect." The tension in the room escalated as the council members began to take notes, clearly recognizing the gravity of the situation. "Council members," the mayor said, bringing the room back to order, "we will take these concerns seriously. We will initiate an investigation into Maplewood Apartments and the management practices of Mr. Hayes." Marcus felt a rush of hope as the room erupted in applause once more. They had done it. They had made their voices heard. After the meeting, Marcus stepped outside, the weight of the world lifting from his shoulders. The sun was shining, and the fresh air felt invigorating. Tanya joined him, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "We did it, Marcus. We really did it," she exclaimed, her voice filled with joy. "They're going to investigate." Marcus nodded, a grin spreading across his face. We stood up for what's right. Together we can make a difference. As the community celebrated their victory, Marcus's thoughts turned back to Mr. Thompson. He knew the fight wasn't over. They had to ensure that the old man received the care he needed. He immediately made plans to return to the hospital. When he arrived, the atmosphere inside was tense but hopeful. He rushed to Mr. Thompson's room, where the old veteran lay, still fighting. "Hey, Mr. Thompson," Marcus said softly, taking the old man's hand in his own. "We made some progress today. The city council is going to investigate Victor's practices. You're not alone in this fight." Mr. Thompson's eyes fluttered open, and a faint smile crossed his lips. "You did it, Marcus. I knew you would," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "We're going to keep fighting for you," Marcus promised, his heart swelling with determination. "You deserve the best care, and we're going to make sure you get it." Days turned into weeks as the investigation unfolded. Victor was scrutinized for his neglectful practices, and the community banded together to support one another. With every passing day, Marcus felt the strength of their unity growing, and he knew they were on the path to real change. Eventually, the city council issued a statement confirming that Victor would face penalties for his actions, and the tenants would receive the repairs they had long been denied. Mr. Thompson was placed in a long-term care facility where he could receive the attention and support he needed. On the day of Mr. Thompson's transfer, Marcus stood beside him, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. "You're going to be okay," he assured the old man. "You're going to get the care you deserve." "Thank you, Marcus," Mr. Thompson replied, his voice stronger than before. "You've shown me that there's still goodness in the world. I'm proud of you, son." As the ambulance drove away, Marcus watched, knowing that he had played a part in something much larger than himself. He had helped a neighbor in need and ignited a movement within the community. Months later, the Maplewood apartments began to transform. Repairs were made, and the atmosphere shifted from one of despair to hope. Marcus found joy in the small victories that came with being part of a community that rallied together. Standing outside the building one afternoon, he saw Tanya approaching. Her face lit up with excitement. "Marcus, the repairs are finally finished. We should have a block party to celebrate." "Absolutely," Marcus replied, a smile spreading across his face. "Let's bring everyone together and celebrate our victory." As they began planning the block party, Marcus felt a sense of fulfillment. He had learned that standing up for what was right could create ripples of change, and he was proud to be part of a community that took action. You've made it to the end. If you enjoyed this story, I am confident that you'll love the next one appearing on the screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and please give this video a like. I'll see you in the next one.